Hey guys, Jason here, and I am back with what I guess is the final installment of my Torekakaku blog coverage of decks from Duel Masters' first decade, or decade or so, I should say. I guess not really much need for an introduction, so let's jump right in. The first deck from 2008 we're going to take a look at is the Grand Devils. So if you played Duel Masters Plays in year one, you may remember the Super Galaxy Vortex evolutions, all the supernova cards like SAD and Big Bang. In those sort of archetypes, the only one that seemed, or rather in that cycle of creatures, the only one that seemed to really take off in the early days of Duel Masters, funnily enough, the Grand Devils, who were actually not that good in my opinion in Duel Masters Plays. I think some lists may run Neptune Shutram, who Andrew affectionately referred to as Tapu Fini as a Pokemon reference, but it does not seem to be present in this list. So one card I do recognize from fairly recent times is Fumagorgon Shack in the top row towards the middle, but yeah, not too much else to comment on here. Another deck we'll talk about is 3-Civ King Alcadeus. So this is another one of the decks that I really wanted Ozesu to be patterned off of, especially because, you know, it runs King Alcadeus, we can run the OG Alcadeus, and then there's some other, you know, bait, it uses some fan favorite cards like Spell Delphin, of course, who I guess you guys might be kind of tired of seeing by now. We've got Triple Mouth in the bottom right hand corner, he's pretty good, and we've also got Perfect Galaxy, who really would rather not leave the field. Of course, King Alcadeus, who is better in the OCG than he is in DMP. I think in DMP, his effect of blocking an opposing summon only happens once, whereas in the OCG, it's consistent. Another card that I think is quite cool that unfortunately doesn't get enough attention is a Hustle Castle, and that is the card to the left of Sky Sword. So it's a castle, so you affix it to one of your shields, and it has a Mistreus style effect. So I think that is something that the TCG really could have benefited from. I know this is something that came out several sets after the fact, but I really like the idea of being able to draw cards outside of the water and light civilizations. So yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, moving on. We've got 5 gods in Dragon. So from the looks of it, looks to be a 4-Civ control-oriented style deck. Yeah, it's definitely not heavy metal, just taking a look at the card in the bottom right-hand corner. Unfortunately, not much I can comment on, but I guess if we just look at the general deck, pretty interesting to see how many TCG cards are still played. You got Fairy Life, Bronze Arm, Terra Pit, Aqua Surfer, and Energy Stream, all in high numbers. And then you also got stuff from the slightly post-TCG era, right? Like Jenny and Hellscrapper. I just think that's pretty interesting. Next deck, we've got the Knights. So Romanov Knight. This is Romanov the Wicked Eye, I believe it is. He's the guy who like loops himself. You attack with him and you play a spell from your graveyard, and like he summons himself, and then it's very sweaty. Andrew made a deck on this in DMP, even though it never quite lived up to expectations. Of course, if you're playing the Knights, you got Prince Avarallo, who is a very strong engine. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck and then grab all the spells. Perfect Galaxy seems to be making a lot of appearances in the decks with light. I guess he's just a very strong finisher / even like good stuffs card, though this deck does not seem to have much mana ramp. And so the Civ combination of this deck looks quite different to what I saw in Duel Masters Plays, as is often the case. So I just thought I'd point that out before moving on. Necro Control. Now we've got only 1 copy of King Alcadeus, but now we have the Queen. Other than that, another card I want to talk about is Crazy Frog. Well, that's not really the name, it's the card in the rightmost side of the second row, Hanzo. In the OCG, I believe there was a keyword called Ninja Strike, something to that effect, and it worked very similarly to shield triggers, but it wasn't exactly the same. In DMP, they decided to give Hanzo shield trigger, and to, I guess, streamline the keywords and the mechanics. But yeah, and I guess they're close enough, so why not? Also, before we move on from this deck, I just want to shout out Asteria, Heaven's Blessing Elemental, who we have in the top row next to Miss Rias. That I thought, that would give Damien a good chuckle there, because he was a big fan of Asteria when we were doing Season 3. Another deck we can talk about is Ghoul. So this is a deck that centers around Necro Dragon Gul'Generade. Gul'Generade saw a lot of play in DMP when he first came out, and then he started seeing some niche applications and some other random decks here and there. Interestingly enough, what he does, for those who are not informed, is when one of your dragons dies and he's in your graveyard, you can summon him out. I also see the Darkness Necro Dragon from the Shang-Chi deck, the one that destroys a creature in the battle zone, and then the owner of that creature gets to resurrect a creature from their graveyard. I think that's pretty interesting. Also, I believe the card next to Skeleton Vice is a part of Death Metal, Heavy Metal Dragon thingy. In Duel Masters Plays, the way they implemented the gods was a lot more elegant than the way it worked in the paper card game. Because, in DMP, because you had the virtual interface, you could basically choose, right, like which side of the god you wanted to summon. In the paper game, no. If you wanted to form the full god, you had to have like both halves of the card out, and then I guess you put them together. So you did not have the same level of flexibility in the paper game as you did in DMP. I suppose the reason for them changing it up in DMP, on one hand, maybe it is for the user experience, but maybe it's also because a lot of the god cards in the paper game didn't work out very well, and so they thought this was one way they could buff the mechanic. So there you go. All right, speaking of heavy metal, we've got another heavy metal deck. So this looks like a 4 Civs Good Stuffs pile. We've kind of seen similar skeletons to this in the previous video. So it looks to me like this is maybe one of the later holdovers from the previous era of the game. Just a general Good Stuffs pile, and then you build it around a couple strong heavy hitters. Curiously enough, we do run one copy of Bejeweled. I think that's kind of funny, but I guess the god is a dragon, so figures that checks out. Also, we got my boy Dimension Splitter in here. You love to see it. This is something that I also realized way too late, but Soul Swap is, in all of the lists that I'm looking at, Soul Swap is only present at one copy, which suggests it is on the Hall of Fame. All right. Shinobi Doll, so Doll Gamer. This is a Dolgeza deck. Dolgeza we have in the bottom right hand side. You love to see it. I wasn't sure when Dolgeza started seeing play in the OCG. In DMP, we know that Carino Giant is what turned his fortunes around, but I don't know how close in the real game they were released. Maybe my eyes are failing me, but I am only now realizing that the card above Dolgeza is probably Carino Giant. So yeah, he is what makes Dolgeza really work. All right, getting very rambly here and incoherent. You can tell that a lot of my Duel Masters knowledge is leaving me. So for this deck, Zanaku, I'm really sorry. There's really not much I can say, but based on this list and the previous list, it seems as if 4 Civ No Fire is the way to go. That's how the game is evolving. Also, we are playing some god cards here. I wonder if... No, I was going to say I wonder if this is one of the gods that we played in DMP, but I don't think so. Anyway, gonna move on. Last deck, okay, well, no, not last deck, that's just wishful thinking on my end, is Counter Baiken. So I am also just now realizing that the Snowball Dragon that we play in DMP, who is a hand guard and has some niche applications, is seeing play in the OCG. Now, the more I look at this deck, this is actually the meme deck that Andrew made quite some time ago that used 100 eyes to nuke your hand and summon a whole bunch of hand guards. Because if you remember, we had this oh my goodness, this is so embarrassing. I'm forgetting all the interactions, but at least you can see you're getting a very raw reaction from me. So the card in the bottom right side, that was also crucial to the strategy. I think it let you, I don't know, it's like you destroy all your creatures when it leaves, or oh, I can't remember, this is terrible. But anyway, I know there was some interaction that card was central to. We used Thousand Eyes and we found a way to like play Thousand Eyes on our opponent's turn, and then we would discard our whole hand, which would be filled with hand guards, and then that would cause a big swing. We have, is that Slime Veil that I'm seeing? We've got some Moltres, Bejeweled Soul, a lot of very interesting cards. Only one Emerald, unfortunately, because Emerald is also on Hall of Fame. But yeah, so I'm not doing a very good job in painting the picture, but if you know, you know. You know 100 Eyes, you know the meme interaction with all the hand guards. This deck was so funny to play in DMP. Now, speaking of Duel Masters Plays, we've got a card that we did see in Duel Masters Plays, but didn't get to play very much, Jack Valdi. So this is a beatdown deck. I really enjoy these sorts of strategies. Jack Valdi is a card designed in a similar vein to Queen Maiden, you know, a decently fast, medium-sized double breaker evolution. I am just a big fan of those sorts of cards. It's being played alongside Emperor Marco, who is what Illusionary Merfolk should have been. Emperor Marco was... Actually, I feel like I'm under the impression it was a very influential card during its time in the OCG, but this is the first time I'm seeing it covered in this blog, so perhaps not. Anyway, we've got 4 copies of Kurian and 1 copy of Aquahulcus. Kurian, for those who don't know, is the Cyberlord version of Aquahulcus. Got Lucky Ball, love to see it. Yeah, so it looks like we're just running like double evolutions and going crazy on our opponent. Another variation of Emperor Marco. All right, here we go. So Emperor Marco, my boy, seeing play. What he does is he's a Cyberlord evolution, 5 mana, 6k double breaker. When you put him in the battle zone, you drop to 3 cards, I think it was. So there's a lot of different ways to play it, apparently. There's a couple of different stuff you can pair it with. Nice to see some Miraculous Rebirth. We've got Fighter Dual Fang. So based on this list and the last list, the general trend for Emperor Marco is you have like... you're running 2 evolution lines that attack, which I think is kind of interesting. This deck, I feel like the strategy is quite primitive, especially in comparison to some of the other decks that we've seen. I feel like the decks are kind of sweaty, or they use cards that I'm unfamiliar with, which would suggest it's a bit more of a sophisticated strategy. This is just Unga Bunga style, you know, ramp mana, draw cards, it's a good time. I guess that strategy still holds up at this point in the timeline because the key cards are doing enough. Like ramping 2 with Fighter Dual Fang, very good. Drawing 3 with Emperor Marco, also very good. I assume that's the reason. But anyway, let's move on to the third, maybe final, I don't know, version of Emperor Marco. And looks like instead of pairing it with fire like the last list, it is now being paired with darkness. You know, being able to have that unconditional spot removal, even for a beatdown deck, maybe especially for a beatdown deck, I find extremely valuable. And here's another fan favorite deck. Well, maybe not fan favorite, certainly one of our favorites, the Arc Seraphims. Earlier, when I talked about the Grand Devils at the start, I said they were the only cycle in that, or the only race in that whole cycle that saw play, but looks like I was wrong. The Arc Seraphims were notable too. So we've got, oh my goodness, I forgot his name, but he was the super important guy that summoned an Arc Seraphim from your mana zone. We've also got that 7 mana hand guard that like helps you draw cards, and that Shaman Broccoli style card. So yeah, I mean, like, I think the dude that helps you summon your Arc Seraphims, that cheats them in, he's the main card in the deck. I don't know why we're only playing 3 copies, but it's pretty good. And anyway, I have missed the Arc Seraphims. RIP Order 69. Shoutouts if you got that reference. Okay. Next. 2009, the next year, we are looking at some Emperor Kiriko. So Emperor Kiriko, as many of you know, who we have, I don't want to say semi-recently seen in DMP. In hindsight, it has been a while. Anyway, Emperor Kiriko lets you summon a bunch of creatures from your deck. So that's always pretty nice. Spell Delphin, he's in there too. Funnily enough, we've got Galamuta and King Alcadia, I don't know what that's about. But I guess all you really need to know is that Amaterasu and Kiriko are the main cards of the deck that you need to make it work. So I guess you just chug along, and then you get to that magic turn where you're able to put Emperor Kiriko into the battle zone. You summon a bunch of big creatures, and you go for gold. Door Kiriko. So by the looks of this, there's more than one way to play Emperor Kiriko. Why Fortress Shell in this build is very interesting to me, because Terra Dragon Zalberg exists. I don't know if there's some anti-dragon synergy going on here, or if it was hit by the Hall of Fame. I don't see why it would be, but yeah, that's pretty interesting. We've got Romanesque to help get Kiriko out a lot faster. We've got Perfect Galaxy. Fortress Shell is targets for Kiriko. Spell Delphin, of course. And the one Transmogrify is very interesting. Mono Blue Aroma. All right, so I think I should also mention that, Astral Reef was hit by the Hall of Fame. Pacific Champion was hit by the Hall of Fame. But, even with the two heavy hitters being hit, it seems as if Mono Water still found a way to be relevant. I'm not too familiar with this list, I'm really sorry, so I'm just going to skip over it. Oh boy, Dragarion Universe. So this is an extremely crazy list. I am seeing a lot of Vortex evolutions. We've got Bad, aka Death Dragarion at the top. We've got Supernova Big Bang Anastasis, got Death Phoenix, got Soul Phoenix, got another Phoenix looking creature in between them. This deck is absolute madness. I don't know how it works, but yeah, so Dragarion Universe, I'm definitely going to have to look this up. This is an insane deck list, and I don't think it's a meme. Okay, and moving to the final year of the article, and finally hitting a deck that I am quite familiar with, we've got a Romanov. So we've got Romanov B. This is the real Romanov B. I feel like I may have misnamed Romanov in a previous deck. But anyway, this is the dude who, when you remove the three guys underneath him, you get to choose up to 3 cards in your opponent's hand and then shuffle them back into their deck. So that was a lot of fun. I remember I really enjoyed playing that deck in DMP. I think there was a special event and I went on a really long win streak with it, maybe like 16 wins, something to that effect, and that was like the longest win streak I ever did. We also played Gold Generate because I think Romanov is also a dragon, and who can forget Sir Virginia, who has been serving the Romanov family for generations. This is also the first deck that I'm covering here that features the mana evolution mechanic. So Romanov B evolves from creatures in your mana zone, certainly a lot easier than the Vortex evolutions or even just the general evolutions, which evolve off guys in your field. Shallot Loop, I'm sorry, I don't know what this does, and I think the video is running long anyway. Funny to see cards like Essence Elf, Clone Factory, and Aurora of Reversal, Dimension Gate. What? Logic Cube, Emergency Typhoon, what is this? All these like funky TCG cards coming back. I don't know what else to say. I am speechless. I am without speech. Volcon, B-Medius control, so early 2010. So this is before the advent of psychic creatures based on this description. Balsaf is no longer here, but B-Medius is. Got that funny Gajira Butte as well. So yeah, it looks like 4-color control still seems to be a solid enough play. A lot of the heavy hitters from, Force of No Nature are no longer present, right? We no longer have Skeleton Vice. We no longer have Slash Charger. Miraculous Snare is at 1. Nariel seems to be at 1. Miraculous Meltdown is very interesting, especially since I don't see any speed attackers. But in saying that, I guess with Miraculous Meltdown, you can just play it, right? And then to break some shields, and then you can swing with your creatures. One thing I did notice about OCG decks in general is they tend to be light on the shield trigger side. So maybe it's fairly low risk. I don't know. But yeah, not as much emphasis is placed on shield triggers in the OCG, at least I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway. Next deck, we've got Fernando Control. I'll just spend a little bit of time so you guys can take a look at this list, but unfortunately, not too familiar. Next, we've got Blue M Roma. So more crazy cards. We've got some Kurian, some Fumagorgon Shack. It's so weird to see Aquahulkus in the Hall of Fame. I think it's because they just wanted to promote the use of Kurian, so they were like, hey, give up on your old boy, play this new guy instead. But I am seeing some hyperspatial cards in here, like I think the card on the leftmost side of the third row, I think is the Fire hyperspatial card. Looks like Miraculous Rebirth is also in here. Hydro Hurricane, that's pretty crazy. It's crazy it took this amount of time for Hydro Hurricane to be recognized as a very good card. You know, we're in 2010, so it took them like, what, 8-ish years? That's wild, but, you know, I guess with the TCG fan base, I feel like Hydro Hurricane only became good well after the game died. So the community had several years of grinding and hindsight to figure it out. But yeah, very interesting nonetheless. Jenny, I think the discard 1 creatures are important to Hydro Hurricane, and we've got a bunch of multi-civ dudes here as well. Oh my goodness, now we have a super wild deck, a Cosmic Darts deck. You love to see it. By the looks of it, this deck wins by attacking with its psychic creatures, a couple of which I do recognize, which were some of the earliest psychic creatures that made their way into DMP. The main deck is composed almost entirely of spells with the exception of Prince Avarallo. I guess it makes sense. When you play Cosmic Darts, you just want to hit a spell, and that's pretty much how it is. So there's no more shield setting shenanigans. That was a bit of a tongue twister with Emerald and Cosmic Darts like we do in the TCG. And even then, you know, the Cosmic Darts TCG decks are kind of memeish anyway, I guess because they're not as like crazy as this one. Funnily enough, I also see Stronghold of Lightning and Flame in the bottom right-hand corner. This is a card that I wanted to use when we did Season 3 for DM13. But yeah, that's pretty wild. I guess you want to, draw cards with Prince Avarallo, hit your Cosmic Darts, and then, maybe play a power spell, psychic spell to get one of your psychic creatures. Yeah. Immortal Orochi. So this one, I see we are playing Balcadias, 1 copy of Balcadias, also 1 copy of Aqua Sniper. That's pretty funny. But beyond that, there's not too much else I can comment on. And I also see Alpha Dios, Lord of Spirits. That's pretty wild. M. Romanov, 1 shot. So, wow. We've got Ghastly Drain and Miraculous Meltdown. This is pretty crazy. 4 copies of Ghastly Drain, 4 copies of Miraculous Meltdown. I am not recognizing the Romanov arts in here, so I can't say for sure how it works. But we got a lot of mana ramp, we've got some graveyard manipulation, and we've also got some shield manipulation. So this deck looks pretty wild. Next deck we've got, and is this the last deck? No, okay, we've got 2 more decks. We've got Blue-Black Quick Attack. So this seems like some form of beatdown deck. We've got Fumagorgon Shack and Time Tripper to really slow down our opponent. I guess playing both of these cards in tandem with each other makes a lot of sense, because if you're only playing one, the chances of you hitting it on turn 3, which is honestly when you really need to hit it, they're quite slim. So yeah, basically having 8 copies of a similar card, I think that's quite good for the deck's consistency. I'm also seeing our favorite Shinigami no Kyoku Death March in the top left-hand corner. So looks like there's more than one way to play a Death March, right? Got Marrow Ooze, you love to see it, and a bunch of other interesting stuff. Love to see some aggro. And for our final deck, we have another familiar face. So in DMP, Andrew and I really enjoyed this deck. A lot of familiar faces in here. Got the Eggplant, got Sniper Mose. We've got the Jungle Governor in the bottom row. Hardy Cap, Death March, obviously a very important card in the deck. But of course, who can be more important than Anima Belgus when he is the multi-civ guy? When you put him in the battle zone, choose one of your creatures, and for this turn only, that creature breaks an extra shield. When you got Maru swinging for 2 shields on the second turn, the fact that he dies after, you know what? Not such a bad thing, I don't think. So this deck is pretty wild, and again, Andrew and I had so much fun with it. But all right, that brings me to the end of the video slash mini-series, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, sorry I ran out of Duel Masters knowledge in the end, but if you, I guess, enjoy the sound of my voice and you like hearing about Duel Masters, hopefully this was worth your while. I'll leave a link to the blog in the description, obviously, and if you're an OCG fan, definitely check out some of the other sections. There's a lot that's covered. Anyway, that's all that I have to say, so thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.